The bullet missed Catherine Newman's head by mere inches, and she knew in that moment, standing in the dusty street of Delta, Colorado in 1882, that she'd made a terrible mistake trusting Thomas Waverly with her heart. Catherine had grown up wild in these mountains, raised by a father who taught her to shoot straight, ride hard, and never depend on any man for survival. When her father died 6 months ago, leaving her the small cabin and 20 acres on the edge of town, she'd mourned him properly but refused to crumble. The other women in Delta whispered about her behind gloved hands, calling her unwomanly, stubborn, too rough around the edges. Catherine didn't care much what they thought. She had her land, her skills, and her pride. Thomas Waverly had courted her for 3 months with sweet words and promises. He was a merchant's son, educated back east, and he seemed charmed by her spirit at first. But last night, when Catherine had refused his proposal, explaining that she intended to keep her own property and make her own decisions even if they married, his face had transformed into something ugly. This morning, she'd found him in the street, drunk and angry, firing his pistol wildly while shouting about ungrateful women who didn't know their place. The sheriff dragged Thomas away while Catherine stood frozen, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to appear calm. She'd been rejected before for her independence, but never quite so violently. "You all right, miss?" The sheriff tipped his hat to her, concern evident in his weathered face. "I'm fine," Catherine said, straightening her spine. "Just fine." But she wasn't fine. As she walked back toward her cabin on the outskirts of town, Catherine felt the weight of loneliness settle over her shoulders like a heavy blanket. She was 22 years old, and every man who'd ever shown interest had eventually tried to cage her, to diminish her, to make her smaller than she was. Her independence, the very thing that made her feel whole, seemed to be the thing that made her impossible to love. The mountains loomed above Delta, their peaks still snow-capped even in late spring. Catherine had always found comfort in their permanence, their indifference to human drama. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the rider approaching until his horse was nearly beside her. "Miss Newman," a deep voice said, and Catherine looked up into the face of Nathan Dawson, her breath caught. Nathan owned the largest ranch in the territory, thousands of acres stretching from the base of the mountains all the way to the river valley. He was 30 years old, unmarried, and the subject of much speculation among the marriageable women of Delta. Catherine had seen him in town before, of course, but they'd never spoken. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Mr. Dawson," she replied, proud that her voice came out steady. "I heard what happened in town," he said, dismounting from his horse with easy grace. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Just my pride, maybe." Nathan studied her face for a long moment. "May I walk with you? I wanted to discuss a business proposition." Catherine's guard went up immediately. "What kind of business?" "The kind best discussed somewhere private. Your cabin, perhaps." "I promise you have nothing to fear from me. You can keep your rifle in your hands the whole time if it makes you comfortable." Despite herself, Catherine was intrigued. "All right, follow me." They walked in silence, Catherine acutely aware of Nathan leading his horse beside her. He moved with the confident ease of a man comfortable in his own skin, but there was no arrogance in his manner. When they reached her cabin, Catherine noticed him taking in the neat repairs she'd made to the porch, the carefully tended vegetable garden, the split wood stacked precisely against the wall. "You keep a good home," he said, and there was approval in his tone that made something warm bloom in her chest. "I take care of what's mine," Catherine replied, opening the door. "Come in." The cabin was small but clean, furnished with her father's handmade furniture, and the few precious items her mother had brought from the East before she died. Catherine gestured to a chair at the table and took the one opposite, very deliberately not picking up her rifle. She wanted to know what this man had to say. Nathan removed his hat and set it on the table. "I'll be direct, Miss Newman. I need a wife." Catherine's heart sank. "Then you've come to the wrong woman. I just refused one proposal and I have no intention of accepting another." "Hear me out," Nathan said, holding up a hand. "I don't need a decorative wife to pour tea and embroider pillows. I need a partner. Someone who can manage half a ranch, make decisions when I'm away, handle accounts and livestock and men. I need someone strong, capable, and independent." Catherine stared at him. "You're not making sense. Most men want to break a woman's independence, not celebrate it." "Most men are fools," Nathan said bluntly. "I've built my ranch from nothing over the past 10 years, started with 100 acres and a dozen head of cattle. Now I've got 5,000 acres and 300 head, plus horses, sheep, and contracts with the railroad. But I can't be everywhere at once. I need someone I can trust to run things when I'm dealing with cattle drives or negotiations in Denver. I need an equal, not a pet." "Why me?" Catherine asked, suspicion still coloring her tone. "You don't know anything about me." "I know more than you think," Nathan said. "I knew your father. He sold me horses a few times, good stock, fair prices. He talked about you, about how you could track a deer through 3 miles of forest, how you kept the books for his trading business, how you once talked down a group of drunk miners without firing a shot. When he died, I thought about approaching you then, but it seemed disrespectful. Then I heard about Waverly courting you and I figured I'd missed my chance." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at the mention of her father, but she blinked them back. "My father talked about me with great pride," Nathan said softly. "He said you were the finest thing he'd ever had a hand in creating. Said you were too good for this rough country, but too stubborn to leave it." "That sounds like him," Catherine whispered. Nathan leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I'm not promising romance or poetry, Miss Newman. I'm promising respect, partnership, and a fair share in everything I've built. The ranch would be half yours legally the day we marry. You'd have equal say in all decisions. And if it doesn't work, if we find we can't stand each other, I'd give you a fair settlement and your freedom." "Why would you offer all that?" Catherine asked. "You could marry any woman in the territory." "I could marry a woman who'd be miserable trying to fit herself into my life," Nathan corrected. "I've seen it happen. Men marry sweet, gentle women and then drag them out to isolated ranches where they wither away from loneliness and hardship. I don't want that. I want someone who loves this land like I do, who won't break under the pressure. I want someone who can stand beside me, not behind me." Catherine stood and walked to the window, her mind racing. Everything Nathan was offering sounded too good to be true. But she'd learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts weren't screaming danger. They were whispering possibility. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Nathan stood as well. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Newman, for what it's worth, Thomas Waverly is a fool. Your independence isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's a strength to be valued." After he left, Catherine sat at her table for a long time, staring at nothing. She thought about the long, lonely winters ahead, the constant struggle to maintain her small property alone, the endless parade of men who would see her as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. And she thought about Nathan's storm-gray eyes, the respectful way he'd spoken to her, the radical proposition he'd offered. 3 days later, Catherine rode out to the Dawson ranch. She'd spent the intervening time asking questions around town, learning what she could about Nathan. Everyone spoke well of him. He paid his ranch hands fairly, dealt honestly in business, and helped his neighbors when times were hard. He was known for his fair treatment of the Ute people who sometimes camped on the edges of his land, trading with them rather than driving them away. He'd never been married, though plenty of women had tried to catch his attention. The ranch itself took her breath away. The main house was a sprawling structure of pine logs and river stone, built to withstand the harsh mountain winters. Corrals and outbuildings spread out in organized clusters, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing in rich pastureland. Mountains formed a dramatic backdrop, and the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. Nathan emerged from the barn as she rode up, and Catherine saw surprise and pleasure flash across his face. "Miss Newman, I'm glad you came. I want to see everything," Catherine said without preamble. "If I'm going to consider this partnership, I need to understand what I'm getting into." "Fair enough," Nathan agreed. "Let me give you the tour." He showed her everything. The barns where the horses were kept sleek and well fed. The cattle on the range, healthy stock with good breeding. The bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived, clean and well maintained. The house itself, with its large kitchen, comfortable furniture and windows that let in floods of mountain light. There was even a library, shelves lined with books on ranching, animal husbandry, and western exploration, along with novels and poetry. "I like to read," Nathan said, almost defensively, when he saw her looking at the books. "So do I," Catherine replied, running her fingers along the spines. She recognized some of the titles. Her father had owned similar volumes. In the office, Nathan showed her the account books, the contracts, the maps of the property. He explained the seasonal rhythms of ranch work, the challenges of getting cattle to market, the delicate balance of managing water rights and grazing land. Catherine asked sharp questions, and Nathan answered them all honestly, never condescending, never simplifying for her benefit. "The hardest part is the isolation," Nathan admitted as they stood on the porch watching the sun sink toward the mountains. "We're 12 miles from town. In winter, we can be snowed in for weeks at a time. It's beautiful, but it's lonely. Some people can't handle it." "I've never minded being alone," Catherine said. "It's being treated like I'm less than whole that I can't handle." Nathan turned to look at her, the setting sun painting his face in warm light. "You'd never be less than whole here, Catherine. May I call you Catherine?" "Yes," she said and realized she meant it. "And I'll call you Nathan." "So what's your answer?" Nathan asked quietly. "Will you marry me and become my partner in this ranch?" Catherine looked out at the land, the mountains, the endless sky. She thought about what her father would have said. He'd always told her to trust her gut, to reach for what she wanted instead of settling for what was safe. "Yes," she said. "But I have conditions." Nathan's face broke into a smile. "Name them." "First, the equal partnership you mentioned is in writing, legally binding. Second, I keep my father's property, maintain it as I see fit. Third, I want a horse of my own, one I choose. Fourth, I make my own decisions about how I spend my time and energy. If I want to work with the cattle, I work with the cattle. If I want to manage the accounts, I manage the accounts. I won't be confined to the house like a pet bird." "Done, done, done, and done," Nathan said. "Anything else?" "I want time," Catherine said. "Time to know you before the marriage is a real marriage. I won't be rushed into intimacy." Nathan's expression grew serious. "Catherine, I would never force or rush you. The physical side of our marriage happens when and if you're ready. That's not negotiable on my part. Your body is yours always." Something tight in Catherine's chest loosened. "Then yes, I'll marry you." They married a week later in a simple ceremony at the church in Delta. The town gossips nearly fainted from shock when news spread that the independent Catherine Newman was marrying the wealthy Nathan Dawson. Catherine wore a practical blue dress rather than white lace, and she spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice. Nathan slipped a simple gold band on her finger, and when the preacher said he could kiss his bride, he brushed his lips against hers so gently it made her heart ache. The ranch hands threw them a celebration that night, with a barbecued steer, fiddle music, and more whiskey than was strictly wise. Catherine met all of Nathan's employees, including Miguel, the foreman who'd been with Nathan since the beginning, and Sarah, the widow who served as cook and housekeeper. Sarah looked at Catherine with cautious approval. "About time he found someone with sense," Sarah said bluntly. "This ranch needs a woman with steel in her spine." Catherine liked her immediately. That night, alone in the big house for the first time, Catherine and Nathan faced each other with sudden awkwardness. Nathan cleared his throat. "I prepared the guest room for you." "The main bedroom is mine, but you're welcome to it if you'd prefer. I can take the guest room." "I'll take the guest room for now," Catherine said, grateful for his consideration. "Thank you for understanding." "We're partners," Nathan said simply. "Partners respect each other's boundaries." Over the following weeks, Catherine threw herself into learning the ranch. She rose before dawn to ride out with Nathan and the hands, checking fences and water sources. She studied the account books until she could recite the numbers in her sleep. She learned which cattle were the best breeders, which horses had the smoothest gaits, which sections of land were prone to flooding in spring. Nathan was a patient teacher, answering her endless questions without irritation. But more than that, he listened to her ideas. When she suggested rotating the cattle through different pastures to prevent overgrazing, he considered it seriously, and then implemented the plan. When she found an error in the accounts from the feed supplier, he trusted her judgment and confronted the merchant. "You have a good head for this," Nathan told her one evening as they reviewed the books together. "Better than mine in some ways. You see patterns I miss." Catherine felt pride bloom in her chest. "My father taught me to pay attention to details. He said the devil was always in the numbers." "Smart man," Nathan said. "I wish I'd known him better." They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side during the day and sharing meals in the evening. Nathan was a good companion, with a dry sense of humor that caught Catherine off guard and made her laugh. He told stories about his early days on the ranch, the disasters and triumphs, the harsh lessons the land had taught him. Catherine found herself sharing her own stories, memories of her father, her childhood in these mountains, her dreams of what she might build with her life. But as comfortable as their days became, the nights remained separate. Catherine retired to her room alone, and though she sometimes heard Nathan moving around in his own room across the hall, he never approached her door. She was grateful for his patience, but she was also beginning to feel something else. A pull, a curiosity, a warmth that spread through her body when Nathan smiled at her or when their hands accidentally touched. Summer deepened into July, and the ranch work grew more intense. They were preparing for the cattle drive to market, a massive undertaking that would take Nathan and most of the hands away for nearly 3 weeks. Catherine would stay behind to manage the ranch in his absence, her first real test as co-owner. The night before Nathan was set to leave, they sat on the porch watching lightning flicker in the distant mountains. The air smelled of coming rain and sage. "Are you nervous?" Nathan asked. "Terrified," Catherine admitted. "What if something goes wrong while you're gone?" "Then you'll handle it," Nathan said confidently. "You're more than capable. Miguel will be here if you need advice, and Sarah knows everything about running the house. But I trust your judgment, Catherine. Whatever decisions you make, I'll support them." Catherine looked at him in the dim light. "Why do you have so much faith in me?" "Because you've earned it," Nathan said simply. In 2 months, you've learned what takes some people years to grasp. But more than that, you care. You check on the horses personally to make sure they're healthy. You notice when one of the hands is having a hard time. You watch the land like you're reading a book. That kind of care can't be taught. Something in his voice made Catherine's heart race. Nathan. Yes. I'm glad I married you, she said softly. I didn't expect to be, but I am. Nathan turned to face her fully, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. I'm glad too. More than glad. Catherine, I know we agreed to take things slow, and I'll honor that. But I need you to know that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a business arrangement for me. You're not just my partner. You're becoming my friend and maybe something more. Catherine's pulse thundered in her ears. Something more. I'm falling in love with you, Nathan said quietly. I don't expect you to feel the same. I just needed you to know before I leave. Catherine stared at him, her mind whirling. She thought about the way her heart lifted when she saw him each morning, the way she found excuses to work alongside him, the way his laugh made her feel warm all over. She thought about the loneliness she'd felt before and how completely it had vanished since coming to this ranch. I think, she said slowly, that I might be falling in love with you too. Nathan's face transformed with joy. Really? Really, Catherine confirmed, and then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was nothing like the chaste kiss at their wedding. This was heat and hunger, weeks of growing attraction finally unleashed. Nathan's hand came up to cup her face and Catherine pressed closer, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I want you to stay with me tonight, Catherine whispered. In your room, our room. Are you sure? Nathan asked, searching her face. I'm sure. Nathan stood and held out his hand. Catherine took it, and he led her inside, up the stairs to the main bedroom. He lit the lamp with trembling hands, and in the soft light, they undressed each other slowly, reverently. Catherine had never been with a man before, and Nathan seemed to sense her nervousness. He was gentle, patient, showing her pleasure she'd never imagined. When they finally came together, Catherine felt complete in a way she'd never experienced, as though a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing had finally clicked into place. Afterwards, she lay in Nathan's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. I love you, she said, testing out the words. They felt right, true. I love you too, Nathan replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. God, Catherine, I love you so much. The next morning, Nathan rode out with the hands and the cattle, heading east toward the railroad. Catherine stood on the porch watching until they disappeared from view, then turned back to the ranch with determination. She had work to do. The first week went smoothly. Catherine rode the property line each day, checking fences and water sources. She approved purchases and managed the ranch hands who'd stayed behind to maintain the property. She worked alongside Sarah in the vegetable garden, putting up preserves for the winter. At night, she sat at Nathan's desk in the library, going over accounts by lamplight and writing him long letters that he'd receive when he returned. But on the 8th day, trouble arrived. Catherine was in the barn checking on a mare who was due to foal when Miguel came running. Mrs. Dawson. There are men at the north fence. They've cut the wire and they're driving our cattle through. Catherine's blood ran cold. Cattle rustling was a serious problem in the territory, and ranchers had been killed trying to stop thieves. But she couldn't just let them steal Nathan's herd. How many men? She asked, already moving toward the house. I saw 4, but there might be more. Catherine burst into the house and grabbed her rifle, checking that it was loaded. She'd been shooting since she was 10 years old, and her father had made sure she was better than good. Get the other hands. We're going after them. Mrs. Dawson, maybe we should wait for the marshal, Miguel said nervously. By the time the marshal gets here from town, those cattle will be gone and sold, Catherine said firmly. This is our land and our stock. We defend it. She saw respect flash in Miguel's eyes. Yes, madam. They rode hard for the north fence, Catherine and 5 ranch hands. When they arrived, Catherine could see the rustlers in the distance, driving about 20 head of cattle toward the tree line. She made quick calculations. They had numbers on their side and the element of surprise. Spread out, she ordered. Form a line. We're going to ride at them hard and fast. Fire shots in the air, make noise, scare the cattle back. Only aim at the men if they shoot first. Understood, the hands nodded, and Catherine saw they were looking at her with new respect. She'd proven herself over the summer, and now they trusted her to lead. Now, Catherine yelled, and they charged. The thunder of hooves, the crack of rifles firing into the air, the shouts of the men, all of it combined to create chaos. The cattle panicked and scattered, running back toward Dawson land. The rustlers, seeing they were outnumbered, fired a few wild shots and then fled into the trees. Catherine pulled up her horse, breathing hard, adrenaline singing through her veins. She'd done it. They'd defended the ranch, and no one had been hurt. Mrs. Dawson, that was incredible. One of the younger hands exclaimed. Miguel rode up beside her, shaking his head in amazement. Nathan chose well. You're as tough as they come, Catherine grinned, feeling fierce pride. Let's get these cattle rounded up and the fence repaired. And someone ride to town and report this to the marshal. Those men need to be caught before they try again. Word of Catherine's defense of the ranch spread through Delta like wildfire. When Nathan returned 3 weeks later, trail worn and dusty but triumphant with a good sale price for the cattle, the story was the first thing he heard in town. He rode back to the ranch at a gallop, his heart in his throat, terrified that something had happened to Catherine. But when he arrived, she was in the corral working with a young horse, calm and competent as ever. She looked up when she heard his horse, and her face broke into a radiant smile. "You're home," she called and ran to him. Nathan dismounted and caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. "I heard what happened. Are you all right? Were you hurt?" "I'm fine," Catherine laughed. "We all are. We scared them off." Nathan set her down but kept his hands on her shoulders, studying her face intently. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't," Catherine said firmly. "Nathan, this is our ranch, our land. I wasn't going to let thieves take what we've built. I did what needed to be done." Nathan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "You're amazing, you know that. You're the most amazing woman I've ever met." "I learned from the best," Catherine said, her voice muffled against his chest. "My father taught me to stand my ground." "You taught me that standing my ground could be part of a partnership, not just a lonely battle." That night, they celebrated his return properly, reuniting in the privacy of their bedroom with an intensity that left them both breathless and satisfied. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the sheets, Nathan traced lazy patterns on Catherine's bare shoulder. "I have something for you," he said, reaching for his saddlebag on the floor. He pulled out a leather pouch and handed it to her. Catherine opened it and found a silver necklace inside, delicate but strong, with a pendant shaped like a mountain peak. "Nathan, it's beautiful." "I saw it in a jeweler's shop in Denver," he said. "It reminded me of you, beautiful and strong like the mountains." Catherine fastened it around her neck, touched beyond words. "Thank you, I love it." "I love you," Nathan said, pulling her back down beside him. "God, I missed you. 3 weeks felt like 3 years." "I missed you too," Catherine admitted. "The bed felt too big without you." "Then I guess I'll have to make sure I'm always here to fill it," Nathan said with a wicked grin that made Catherine laugh and swatted him playfully. The seasons turned, summer fading into the brilliant gold and red of mountain autumn. Catherine and Nathan fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. They worked together, ate together, slept together, their partnership deepening into something profound. Catherine had never imagined she could feel this way, so completely herself and yet so completely part of a pair. Nathan had been right. Independence and partnership weren't opposites. They were two sides of the same coin. In October, Catherine realized her monthly courses were late. At first, she dismissed it as stress, but when another week passed with no sign, she couldn't deny the truth. She was pregnant. She told Nathan that evening while they sat by the fire, autumn wind howling outside. "I'm going to have a baby," she said simply. Nathan's face cycled through shock, joy, and terror in rapid succession. "A baby? Are you sure?" "Pretty sure," Catherine said, pressing a hand to her stomach. "The signs are all there." Nathan knelt in front of her chair, placing his hands over hers. "How do you feel about it?" It was such a Nathan question, checking in with her feelings before expressing his own. Catherine smiled. "Scared, excited, hopeful. How do you feel?" "All of that, plus terrified I'll be a terrible father," Nathan admitted. "You'll be a wonderful father," Catherine said firmly. "You're patient, kind, and fair. You'll teach our child to love this land and respect all people. What more could I want?" Nathan kissed her then, soft and sweet. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "Thank you for this life, this home, this family." Winter came hard and fast that year, snow piling up in drifts that reached the windows. The ranch settled into its cold weather routine, the hands tending to the animals in the barns, Sarah cooking hearty stews, Nathan and Catherine managing accounts and planning for spring. Catherine's belly grew, and Nathan became increasingly protective, though he tried to hide it. "I'm pregnant, not fragile," Catherine reminded him when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know," Nathan said sheepishly. "I just worry." "I'll be careful," Catherine promised, "but I'm not going to spend the next 6 months sitting in a chair like a porcelain doll." The baby was due in May, and as winter slowly loosened its grip on the mountains, Catherine prepared. Sarah, who'd raised 4 children of her own, became her advisor and friend. They sewed baby clothes together, prepared a nursery in one of the spare rooms, and made lists of supplies they'd need. Nathan ordered a cradle from a craftsman in Delta, beautiful carved pine with a gentle rocking motion. When it arrived, he spent an entire evening putting it together in the nursery, his face soft with wonder. "I can't believe there's going to be a baby sleeping in this," he said, running his hand over the smooth wood. "Our baby," Catherine said, waddling over to stand beside him. She was 7 months along now, her belly enormous, and she felt ungainly and uncomfortable. But Nathan looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Our baby," he repeated, placing his hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, and Nathan's face lit up with joy. "Did you feel that?" "I feel everything," Catherine said dryly. "This child is a kicker." "Takes after his mother," Nathan teased. "Could be a daughter," Catherine pointed out. "Doesn't matter to me," Nathan said seriously. "As long as you're both healthy, I don't care if we have a boy or a girl." In late April, when the snow had finally melted and the first wildflowers were pushing up through the earth, Catherine went into labor. It was early morning, and Nathan had just gone to the barn. She was in the kitchen with Sarah when the first contraction hit, stealing her breath. "That's it," Sarah said calmly. "Time to have this baby. Go lie down, I'll fetch Nathan and send someone for the doctor." The next 12 hours were the hardest of Catherine's life. Labor was pain like she'd never experienced, waves of it that seemed endless. Nathan stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. The doctor arrived from town and took over with calm efficiency. "You're doing fine, Mrs. Dawson," he said. "First babies take their time." "I want this baby out," Catherine groaned. "Almost there," the doctor assured her. Finally, as the sun was setting and painting the room in golden light, Catherine gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world: her baby crying. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, wailing infant on Catherine's chest. "A healthy boy." Catherine looked down at her son, overwhelmed with love so fierce it nearly stopped her heart. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. Nathan was crying unashamedly, his hand gentle on the baby's small head. "We have a son," he whispered. "Catherine, we have a son." They named him Daniel James Dawson, Daniel after Catherine's father and James after Nathan's grandfather. Daniel was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin. Catherine took to motherhood with the same intensity she brought to everything else, though she was surprised by how much she loved it. She'd worried pregnancy and childbirth would make her feel trapped, diminished. Instead, she felt powerful in a new way. Nathan was a devoted father from the start. He'd hold Daniel for hours, walking the floor when the baby fussed, singing old cowboy songs in his rumbling voice. Catherine would wake in the night to feed Daniel and find Nathan already there, having heard the baby stir. "You don't have to get up every time," she told him one night. "You need your sleep." "I want to," Nathan said simply. "I don't want to miss anything." As Daniel grew from an infant to a toddler, Catherine gradually returned to ranch work. She'd never stopped managing the accounts, even in the late stages of pregnancy. But now she was back in the saddle, riding the property with Daniel strapped to her back in a carrier Nathan had made. The ranch hands got used to seeing their boss with a baby, and Daniel grew up surrounded by horses, cattle, and wide open spaces. When Daniel was 2, Catherine became pregnant again. This time, having done it once before, she felt more confident. The pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1885, she gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret Rose, Maggie for short. Maggie was a sweet-tempered baby with Nathan's storm-gray eyes and a smile that could light up a room. With 2 children, the ranch house felt full in the best way. Daniel adored his little sister, bringing her toys and patting her head gently. Nathan balanced ranch work with family time, often coming in from the fields to play with the children before supper. Catherine managed to do it all, running the ranch, raising the children, and maintaining the partnership with Nathan that had started everything. But life on a ranch was never entirely peaceful. When Daniel was 4 and Maggie was 2, disaster struck. A late spring storm came through with unusual fury, heavy rain that lasted for 3 days straight. The river that bordered the northern edge of Dawson property flooded, jumping its banks and sweeping away fences, drowning several head of cattle and threatening the main house itself. Catherine and Nathan worked frantically to move the cattle to higher ground, while Sarah evacuated with the children to town. The rain came down in sheets, turning the ground to mud, making every movement treacherous. Catherine was trying to help herd cattle across a swollen creek when her horse lost its footing. Everything happened in slow motion. She felt the horse stumble, felt herself sliding, and then she hit the water. The current was stronger than she'd expected, and it pulled her under immediately. She fought to surface, her heavy rain slicker dragging her down. Panic clawed at her throat. Then strong hands grabbed her arms and hauled her up. Nathan had jumped in after her, and now he dragged her to the bank, both of them gasping and choking. They collapsed on the muddy ground, the rain still pouring down. "Are you hurt?" Nathan demanded, his hands running over her, checking for injuries. "I'm okay," Catherine managed. "Just scared." Nathan pulled her close, his whole body shaking. "I thought I'd lost you." "God, Catherine, I thought the river had taken you." "I'm here," Catherine said, holding him tight. "I'm okay. We're okay." They stayed like that for a long moment, two people clinging to each other in the rain, grateful to be alive. Then they stood up and got back to work, because the ranch still needed saving. By the time the storm passed, the damage was extensive but not catastrophic. They'd lost some livestock and several miles of fence, but the buildings were intact and no one had been seriously hurt. The cleanup took weeks, but Catherine and Nathan tackled it together as they did everything. "We make a good team," Nathan said one evening as they surveyed the repaired north fence. "The best team," Catherine agreed, leaning against his side. The years rolled on, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growth of their family. Daniel grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved the horses and showed early signs of his grandfather's trading instincts. Maggie was all sunshine and wildness, climbing trees and catching frogs and keeping everyone entertained. In 1888, Catherine gave birth to a third child, another boy they named Thomas, Tommy for short. Nathan joked that they were starting their own ranch crew, but Catherine could see the deep satisfaction in his eyes when he looked at their family. This was what they'd built together, not just a successful ranch but a home, a legacy, a life full of love. By 1890, the Dawson Ranch was the most successful in the territory. Nathan and Catherine had expanded the property, adding another 1,000 acres and diversifying into horse breeding. Catherine's instinct for good bloodlines had proven invaluable, and their horses were in high demand. They employed 15 ranch hands full-time, and the bunkhouse had been expanded twice. Delta had grown too, from a rough mining town into a proper community with a school, 3 churches, and even a small hospital. Catherine served on the school board, using her voice to improve education for all the children in the area. Nathan was elected to the town council, where he advocated for fair treatment of the Ute people and better infrastructure. They were respected, successful, and genuinely happy. But more than that, they were still deeply in love. Nathan still looked at Catherine like she hung the moon, and she still felt her heart skip when he smiled at her. They'd built something rare and precious, a marriage of true equals. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Daniel was 9 now, Maggie was 7, and Tommy was 2, all 3 children playing in the yard under Sarah's watchful eye. Catherine rested her head on Nathan's shoulder, feeling peaceful. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked quietly. "Marrying me, giving up your independence?" Catherine lifted her head to look at him, surprised. "I didn't give up my independence, I expanded it. Before I met you, I had 20 acres and a cabin. Now I have half of 5,000 acres and more freedom than I ever dreamed of. I run this ranch alongside you. I make decisions that affect dozens of people. I'm raising 3 incredible children. How is that giving up anything?" "I just want to make sure you're happy," Nathan said. "That you don't feel trapped." "Nathan Dawson," Catherine said firmly, taking his face in her hands. "Listen to me. I am happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me partnership when every other man wanted to give me a cage. You celebrated my strength instead of trying to diminish it. You've been my partner, my lover, my best friend. I've never felt trapped, not for one single day." Nathan's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Catherine said, kissing him softly. "Thank you for seeing me all those years ago. Thank you for understanding that independence was what I needed, not something to be beaten out of me." "Thank you for taking a chance on me," Nathan replied. "On us." They sat together as the stars came out, watching their children play, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the rising moon. The mountains stood eternal in the darkness, solid and unchanging. "Tell me something," Catherine said. "That day you came to my cabin with your proposal, had you planned what you were going to say?" Nathan laughed. "I'd been rehearsing it for weeks. But when I actually saw you, standing there all proud and wounded from Waverly's rejection, everything I'd planned flew out of my head. I just knew I had to be honest. I had to tell you exactly what I needed and hope it was what you needed too." "It was exactly what I needed," Catherine said, "though I didn't know it at the time. Do you remember what you said to me that night after I told you I was falling in love with you?" Nathan asked. "I said I thought I might be falling in love with you too." "Do you know when I knew for certain you loved me?" Nathan said. "Not thought you might, but actually did." Catherine shook her head. "When you stood up on this porch after I came back from the cattle drive and you defended the ranch from rustlers. You looked so fierce and proud and happy. And I realized you were proud not just of defending the ranch, but of defending our ranch, our home. That's when I knew you loved me, because you'd claimed this place as yours and fought for it." Catherine felt tears sting her eyes. "I did love you then. I think I loved you even before that, but I was still learning to trust it, learning to believe that loving you didn't mean losing myself." "You could never lose yourself," Nathan said. "You're too strong, too sure of who you are. It's one of the things I love most about you." Daniel ran up to the porch, his face flushed with play. "Mama, Papa, can we have a story before bed?" "Of course," Catherine said, opening her arms. Daniel climbed into her lap, still small enough to fit, though he was growing fast. Maggie and Tommy came running too, and Nathan scooped them both up. "What story do you want?" Nathan asked. "Tell us about how you and Mama met," Maggie said. "That's my favorite." Nathan and Catherine exchanged a smile. They'd told the story many times, and it never got old. "Well," Nathan began, "your mama was the most independent woman in all of Colorado. Some people thought she was too independent, but I knew better." "You knew independence was what you needed," Daniel chimed in, having heard the story before. "Exactly right," Nathan confirmed. "So I rode to her cabin and asked her to be my partner. And Mama said yes, and you fell in love and built this ranch together," Maggie finished in a rush. "That's the short version," Catherine laughed. "But yes, that's what happened. Will I find someone to build something with?" Daniel asked seriously. Catherine smoothed his hair back. "You'll find exactly what you need when the time is right. Just remember that love is about two whole people choosing to build something together, not about one person making themselves smaller to fit what the other wants." "You and Papa are both whole," Maggie observed. "Yes, we are," Catherine agreed, meeting Nathan's eyes over their daughter's head. "And we built something wonderful together." Later, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Catherine and Nathan walked down to the barn to check on a mare who was due to foal. The night air was cool and clean, full of the scent of hay and horses and pine from the mountains. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't come to my cabin that day?" Catherine asked. "Sometimes," Nathan admitted. "I probably would have eventually married someone suitable, been respectably unhappy, and never known what I was missing. What about you?" "I think I would have stayed alone," Catherine said honestly. "I'd convinced myself that independence and love were incompatible, that I could only have one or the other. You showed me that was wrong." They reached the barn and checked on the mare, who was resting comfortably. On the way back to the house, they stopped in the middle of the yard and Nathan pulled Catherine into his arms. "Dance with me," he said. "There's no music," Catherine pointed out. "We don't need music." So they danced in the moonlight, swaying together in the quiet night. Catherine rested her head on Nathan's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling completely at peace. This was her life, the one she'd built through courage and choice. This was her home, her family, her love. "Happy," Nathan murmured against her hair. "Happier than I have words for," Catherine replied. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle diseases and broken bones, close calls and narrow escapes. But through it all, Catherine and Nathan faced everything together, their partnership only growing stronger with time. Daniel grew into a fine young man, taking on more and more responsibility at the ranch. By the time he was 18, he was essentially Nathan's co-foreman, and he had his grandfather's gift for reading people and situations. Maggie, at 16, was already breaking hearts all over Delta, though she showed no interest in settling down. She wanted to see something of the world beyond Colorado first, and Catherine and Nathan supported her ambitions. Tommy, at 12, was still finding his way, but he had a gift with the horses that suggested he'd found his calling. In 1896, when Catherine was 36 and Nathan was 44, they sat on the porch one evening watching the familiar sunset. It had been 14 years since they married, and Catherine could hardly remember what life had been like before Nathan. He was woven into every part of her, essential as breathing. "I got a letter from the territorial governor today," Nathan said casually. Catherine looked at him in surprise. "What did he want?" "He's forming a commission to study water rights and land use across the territory. He wants me to serve on it. The work would require me to be in Denver for a week every month." "That's wonderful," Catherine said sincerely. "You'd be excellent at that work. Will you do it?" "Only if you'll come with me," Nathan said. "Half the commission work we can do together. They want someone with practical ranching experience, and you have just as much as I do. Maybe more." Catherine's heart swelled. Even after all these years, Nathan still saw her as an equal partner. "Then we'll do it together. Daniel is more than ready to manage things here while we're away." "That's what I thought too," Nathan agreed. "We're going to be grandparents soon, you know. Daniel's been making eyes at the Morrison girl, and I don't think it'll be long before he asks to marry her." "Grandparents," Catherine repeated, testing the word. "That makes me feel old." "You're not old," Nathan said, pulling her close. "You're as beautiful as the day I first saw you standing in that dusty street after Waverly made a fool of himself." "Flatterer," Catherine accused, but she was pleased. "Truth-teller," Nathan corrected and kissed her to prove it. True to Nathan's prediction, Daniel announced his engagement to Emma Morrison that fall. They were married the following spring in a ceremony that filled the church in Delta to capacity. Catherine watched her eldest son pledge his life to the pretty, practical woman he'd chosen, and she felt the satisfying weight of legacy. Daniel had learned from watching his parents what a good marriage looked like, and he was starting his own life with wisdom. Nathan and Catherine's work with the Territorial Commission proved challenging but rewarding. They traveled to Denver regularly, consulting with ranchers, farmers, miners, and native tribal leaders about fair allocation of water resources. Catherine's voice on the commission was particularly valuable. As one of the few women involved in the discussions, she brought perspectives that the men often overlooked. She advocated for protecting water sources for small ranchers and farmers, not just the big cattle operations. She insisted on including native voices in the discussions, arguing that the Ute and other tribes had been managing water resources successfully for generations and had wisdom to share. Some of the other commissioners found her strident, but Nathan backed her completely, and gradually they won respect. In 1898, the commission published its recommendations, and many of them were adopted into territorial law. Catherine's name was on the document alongside Nathan's and the other commissioners. She kept a copy in the ranch office, a tangible reminder that she'd helped shape the future of the territory she loved. Maggie left for Denver that same year, having secured a position teaching at a school for girls. Catherine was proud of her daughter's ambition, but she missed her terribly. Tommy, now 14, filled the gap somewhat with his constant energy and questions. He was becoming an excellent horseman, with dreams of breeding the finest horses in the West. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan and Catherine were approaching their late middle years now, both showing touches of gray in their hair and lines around their eyes from years of squinting into the mountain sun. But they were healthy and strong, still working the ranch side by side, still deeply in love. One night in their bedroom, Catherine stood before the mirror brushing out her hair. Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. In the mirror, she could see them both, older now but still unmistakably them. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked. "How lucky I am," Catherine said honestly. "Thomas Waverly rejected me for being too independent, and I thought I was doomed to be alone. But then you came along and said independence was exactly what you needed. You changed my whole life." "You changed mine too," Nathan said. "I was building a ranch, but it wasn't a home until you came. You brought life to this place. Love, family, purpose beyond just accumulating more land and cattle. We built it together," Catherine said, turning in his arms to face him. "Everything we have, we built together." "Together," Nathan agreed, and kissed her with all the passion of their first kiss, all the tenderness of 20 years of shared life. In 1900, as a new century dawned, the Dawson Ranch celebrated its 20th anniversary under joint ownership. Nathan and Catherine threw a huge party, inviting everyone from Delta and beyond. The ranch hands, past and present, came to celebrate. Sarah, now in her 70s but still cooking up a storm, presided over tables laden with food. Daniel and Emma came with their 2 children, Catherine and Nathan's grandchildren. Maggie came home from Denver with stories of city life. Tommy, now 16 and already taller than his father, organized horse races for the entertainment. Standing on the porch looking out at the celebration, Catherine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the frightened, angry woman she'd been 18 years ago, convinced that her independence made her unlovable. She thought about Nathan's radical proposition, his understanding that independence and partnership could coexist. She thought about everything they'd built, this ranch, this family, this life. Nathan found her and slipped his hand into hers. "Happy?" It was his favorite question, asked 1,000 times over the years, and Catherine's answer was always the same. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible." "Me too," Nathan said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Me too." They stood together watching the party, watching their children and grandchildren, watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved. The land spread out before them, 5,000 acres of promise and possibility. And at the heart of it all was a partnership forged in mutual respect, strengthened by love and proved by time. Catherine had been rejected for being too independent, but the rancher had said independence was what he needed. And in that perfect matching of need and nature, they'd found not just love but a life beyond imagining. The party went on late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter echoing across the ranch. Children ran wild under the stars while adults shared stories and dreams. And through it all, Catherine and Nathan moved together, 2 people who'd chosen each other and built a world where independence and love were not opposites, but 2 sides of the same precious coin. As the years rolled on into the new century, Nathan and Catherine gradually stepped back from the day-to-day management of the ranch. Daniel took over as primary manager, proving himself more than capable. Tommy started his horse breeding program, developing a line of animals known throughout the territory for their stamina and intelligence. Even Maggie eventually returned from Denver, bringing with her a husband and a desire to open a school right there in Delta. Nathan and Catherine, now in their 50s, spent their time traveling, consulting, and most importantly, enjoying the fruits of decades of hard work. They took a trip to San Francisco, Catherine's first time seeing the ocean. They visited Emma's family in Wyoming. They spent long, lazy days on the ranch porch, watching their grandchildren grow. But age came for them as it comes for everyone. Nathan developed a persistent cough that worried Catherine, though the doctor assured them it was nothing serious. Catherine's joints ached on cold mornings, the price of years of hard physical work. They moved a little slower, tired a little easier, but their love never dimmed. In 1905, they celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They rode out to a favorite spot on the ranch, a meadow high in the hills where wildflowers bloomed in summer and you could see for miles. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching clouds drift across the endless sky. 23 years, Catherine mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you showed up at my cabin with your wild proposition. Other times it feels like we've been together forever. Both are true, Nathan said, lying back on the blanket and pulling her down beside him. Every day with you feels new, but I also can't remember what life was like before you. Do you have any regrets? Catherine asked. Nathan turned his head to look at her. Not a single one, Not one, Catherine confirmed. Well, maybe I regret not kissing you sooner. We wasted those first few months. Nathan laughed, the sound warm and familiar. We weren't wasting time. We were building a foundation. Everything that came after was stronger because we took our time. When did you get so wise? Catherine teased. I learned from the best, Nathan said, echoing words she'd spoken to him long ago. They lay together in the meadow as the afternoon sun warmed them. Two people who'd beaten the odds and built a marriage of true equals in a time and place that didn't often permit such things. Catherine thought about all the women who'd told her she was too much, too independent, too unwilling to bend. And she thought about Nathan, who'd seen those exact qualities and called them essential. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For seeing me. Really seeing me. For understanding that independence wasn't something to be trained out of me, but something to be celebrated. Nathan propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with those storm-gray eyes she'd loved for more than 2 decades. Catherine, you saved me just as much as I saved you. I was building an empire but living in isolation. You brought love and family and purpose. You taught me that success without someone to share it with is just loneliness in a nicer package. Catherine reached up to cup his face, her thumb tracing the lines around his eyes. We saved each other then. We saved each other, Nathan agreed, and kissed her with all the love of 23 years. The sun was setting when they finally rode back to the ranch house. As they approached, Catherine could see lights in the windows, smoke rising from the chimney. Home, she thought. This was home, not just a place but a feeling, a partnership, a love that had stood every test. Years continued their relentless march. Daniel and Emma gave Catherine and Nathan 6 grandchildren total. Tommy married a girl from town and started his own family. Maggie's school flourished, educating not just girls but boys too, rich and poor, white and native. The Dawson legacy spread through Delta and beyond, built on principles of fairness, hard work, and mutual respect. Nathan's cough worsened as he moved into his 60s, despite the doctor's best efforts. Catherine nursed him through bad spells, sat with him on good days, and refused to let him see how terrified she was. They'd had nearly 30 years together, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. In 1910, on a crisp autumn morning with the aspens turned gold and the air smelling of coming snow, Nathan died peacefully in their bed with Catherine holding his hand. His last words were, "Thank you for saying yes." And Catherine, tears streaming down her face, whispered back, "Thank you for asking." The funeral drew people from all over the territory. Ranchers and townspeople, Ute leaders and railroad executives, all came to pay their respects to a man who'd lived with integrity and died loved. Catherine stood strong through it all, supported by her children and grandchildren, saying goodbye to her partner, her love, her best friend. The weeks after Nathan's death were the darkest of Catherine's life. She wandered the ranch in a daze, unable to believe he was truly gone. The bed felt too big without him. The silence was crushing. She'd been independent before she met Nathan, but this felt different. This wasn't independence. This was loneliness. Daniel found her one morning sitting in the ranch office, staring at the account books without seeing them. He knelt beside her chair. "Mama, we're worried about you." "I'm fine," Catherine said automatically. "No, you're not," Daniel said gently. "And that's okay. You lost Papa. You're allowed to grieve." Catherine looked at her son, seeing so much of Nathan in his face. "I don't know how to be without him. We did everything together for 28 years. He was part of me." "He still is," Daniel said. "Mama, look at this ranch. Look at our family. Look at what you built together. Papa's gone, but his legacy lives on, and so does yours. You're not done yet." Catherine felt something stir inside her, a small spark of the strength that had always defined her. "You're right. I'm not done yet." She threw herself into ranch work with renewed purpose, finding comfort in the familiar routines. She worked with Tommy on the horse breeding program, consulted with Daniel on ranch management, helped Maggie plan an expansion of the school. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, keeping Nathan's memory alive. Slowly, painfully, Catherine found her footing again. The grief never went away entirely, but she learned to carry it. She learned to find joy again in small things, watching the sunrise over the mountains, the laughter of grandchildren, the satisfaction of a job well done. One day, about a year after Nathan's death, Catherine rode out to the meadow where they'd spent their last anniversary together. She sat in the wildflowers and talked to Nathan, telling him about the ranch, the family, her life. And for the first time since his death, she felt peace. "You were right, my love," she said to the wind. "Independence and partnership aren't opposites. They're complementary. You taught me that. And now I have to find a way to be independent again, but carrying our partnership in my heart." Catherine lived for another 15 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1925 at the age of 65. In those years, she saw the Dawson Ranch continue to thrive under Daniel's management. She saw Tommy's horses become legendary throughout the West. She saw Maggie's school educate hundreds of children. She saw her grandchildren grow up and start families of their own. But more than that, she lived as a testament to the power of partnership built on mutual respect. She'd been rejected for being too independent, but Nathan had seen her independence as strength, not flaw. Together, they'd built something that lasted beyond their lifetimes. When Catherine died, she was buried beside Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked by simple stones bearing their names and the dates of their lives. But their real monument was the land itself, the family they'd created, the legacy of love and respect they'd left behind. The Dawson Ranch continued for generations, passed down from parent to child, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. But it all traced back to two people who'd had the courage to be different, who'd chosen partnership over convention, who'd proved that independence and love could not just coexist but flourish together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right through the Colorado mountains, people swore they could feel the presence of Catherine and Nathan, still riding their land, still partners, still in love, forever part of the ranch they'd built together. The story of Catherine and Nathan became part of Delta's folklore, told and retold until it took on mythic proportions. But those who'd known them insisted the reality was even better than the legend. They'd been real people with real flaws and real struggles, but they'd loved each other with a depth and constancy that changed everyone around them. Their great-great-grandchildren still ran the ranch in the 1950s, modernizing while honoring tradition. The land had been in the family for nearly 70 years by then, a testament to what Catherine and Nathan had built. And in the ranch office, carefully preserved behind glass, hung the original partnership agreement Nathan had drawn up before their wedding, the document that made Catherine an equal owner. It was a reminder of the radical choice they'd made to build a marriage as true partners. The greatest legacy Catherine and Nathan left wasn't the land or the money or even the family, though all were precious. Their greatest legacy was the example they set, that love doesn't require one person to be less so another can be more. That true partnership celebrates both people fully. That independence and intimacy can strengthen each other rather than compete. Catherine had been rejected for being too independent, but the rancher had said, "Independence is what I need." And in that perfect alignment of values, in that mutual recognition and respect, they'd found everything. They'd found love that lasted a lifetime and echoed through generations. They'd found partnership that made them both stronger. They'd found home, and that, in the end, was the greatest love story of all. Not the fairy tale of a woman tamed or saved, but the true story of two whole people choosing to build something together, both bringing their strength to the table, both giving and receiving respect and love in equal measure. It was a love story for the ages, set against the wild beauty of the Colorado mountains, as enduring as the land itself. The sun set on the Dawson Ranch countless times after Catherine and Nathan were gone, painting the mountains in familiar shades of purple and gold. The seasons turned, bringing snow and sun, drought and abundance. Cattle grazed, horses ran, children grew. Life continued as it always does, but the spirit of what Catherine and Nathan built remained, woven into every fence post and barn beam, every blade of grass and mountain peak. They'd taken a chance on each other, on a new kind of partnership, on a love built from mutual respect rather than domination. And in doing so, they'd created something that couldn't die with their bodies. They'd created a legacy of possibility, proof that there was another way to love, another way to live. For Catherine Newman, who'd been told her independence made her unlovable, had found a man who said her independence was exactly what he needed. And together, Nathan and Catherine Dawson had built an empire, raised a family, and lived a love story that proved independence and partnership, far from being opposites, were two halves of one beautiful whole. Their story ended as all stories must, but the truth they lived echoed on. In every partnership of equals, in every relationship built on mutual respect, in every love that celebrates both people fully, Catherine and Nathan's legacy lived on. They'd shown that it was possible that true partnership could exist, that love could be both romantic and respectful, passionate and equal. And so their story, which began with a rejected proposal and a bold counteroffer, which grew through years of partnership and love, which weathered storms both literal and figurative, came to its close not with sadness but with fulfillment. They'd lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they'd found it. The Dawson Ranch stood against the mountains, eternal as the stone peaks themselves, a testament to two people who dared to love differently and in doing so had built something that would last forever.